August meeting of the Public Safety to order. Madam Clerk, will you roll call?
James Slender,
Present.
Ron Buckholz,
Present.
Ed Peters,
Present.
Dale Schluter, Chuck Van Etten.
All right. Madam Clerk, are we in compliance with open meeting clause?
Meeting has been noticed to the public and news media as required by section 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes.
The meeting agenda has been posted. Is there any modifications or any other comments from the agenda from members of the committee? Hearing none, moving on to number 5, public comment. Is there anybody here who's not on the agenda that wishes to address the committee at this time?
Yes, this to the chair, so to speak. I don't know if you want me to speak during public comments or when you get to the EMS report. Either one's fine with me.
So depends on what your schedule is.
I have the morning.
I have no preference, so,
I believe you come before in public comment.
all right. So you guys want to split the difference and let her sit next to one of the microphones?
Sure. My name is Louise Ladenton. I live in Ojibwa. My address is 7442 State Highway 70. I'm here to ask this committee to consider developing policy for the ambulance service wherein they have not enough vehicles to cover 911. And I leave that to your discretion to decide, but certainly during the busy months of the year, which are always, of course, the middle of June to the middle of September, to not short our coverage of 911 by having ambulances taking transfers outside of the area. I know it won't happen overnight, but I seriously think it needs to be done. The following example, my great-grandson dislocated his elbow at a very distant remote location in the county. We called for an ambulance because I knew that we had ALS, which would provide pain control for him, and I didn't want to move him without it because he was in excruciating pain. I was told there were no ambulances available. I talked to Nate at the ambulance service yesterday morning, and he indicated that 2 units were out, or the morning before, I forget the days, and that one was committed to a event, and another one was out of service due to repair. I'm not sure if it was body repair or engine repair. He didn't indicate. So he was down 2, and then 2 were out on transfers outside of the area, leaving us a total of 3 ambulances out of a total of 7 available for 911 to cover the county, which is sufficient according to the plan, but according to me, it isn't sufficient when you have an extra probably 10 to 15 to 20,000 people in the community because of tourism on a weekend. And that's my request. Yeah, I did ask him if there was a policy. He said, no, there wasn't. And then I asked him, well, why would that even happen? And he said, well, because the benefit of taking the out, not his words, my words, but he explained it, that the benefit financially of taking the out of county transfers was beneficial to the whole of the service. And it was his understanding that that was the reason why they do it. Any questions, I'd be glad to take them. Otherwise, I have nothing else to say.
So, Louise, when we do public comment, it's the custom of the board or the committee to not engage in the comment back and forth. So your information has been presented. If you want to wait until we get to the ambulance report, then we can have a discussion on what your request is. So,
Certainly, thank you.
all right. Is there anybody else here or anybody else online that wishes to address the committee that's not on the agenda? Hearing none, moving on to number 6, minutes from the July meeting.
Mr. Chair,
Buckholz.
as reading, I wasn't here at the last meeting, but when I was reading the public comments or the minutes, there is a discretion and a name in the minutes. And I pointed it out to Mr. Schluter and Mr. Peters. I just wanted to make note that that's a error. It states in there that Ed Schleter seconded the motion. There's no Ed Schleter. That's and I just want to bring that up, that it's a mistake in the minutes.
Any other comments on the minutes?
With that said, then I'll make a motion to approve with the corrections.
So I have a motion, I have a second, to approve the minutes with corrections. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Schleter? Okay. So a motion from Mr. Buckles, a second from Mr. Schleter. Hearing no discussion, call for the vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Moving on to number 7, Circuit Court. Judge is not present. Courthouse remodel update, Mr. Hoff.
Thank you. We've had a meeting with, actually several meetings with our group staff, with the architect and Myron Construction to develop schematic drawings for the new court addition. Ad hoc committee met this morning to review the schematic drawings, which will now be forwarded to Myron Construction for developing the first construction budget. And then from there, we'll have to tweak things to see where we're at, but the schematic drawings are done. That kind of outlines exactly what the footprint of the building looks like and the interior with the traffic flow and everything else. So we are moving along. We are on schedule, and the next step is to develop a budget for that plan.
Sure, you need a chair.
No.
You can have this one right here,
I'm
Sherry.
really good, thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Hoff? Hearing none, moving on to number 8. Clerk of Courts, Madam Clerk, the floor is yours.
Wondering if there's any questions on my report submitted?
Is there any highlights that we should be excited to review?
Well, the first, I had a copy of what I submitted, but it disappeared. If you look at the very top, it gives the amount for restitution. I have to do a yearly restitution report. And when I compared last year's report to this year's report, last year we were able to send out over 22,000 in restitution. This past year's report, we were able to send out over 49,000. We're pretty excited to be able to send that out for the victims.
Any questions for the clerk? Chuck, you got any questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Ed has the floor.
Any reason? Is there some reason why that occurred? Just
I feel it's because we have our financial clerk who's dedicated to our collections.
great.
Chuck, you got any questions for the clerk?
I do not. Thank you.
Moving on to number 9, District Attorney. District Attorney is not present. Moving on to number 10, Sheriff, the floor is yours.
I'll start off by saying it's been pretty busy here this summer, a lot of traffic, a lot of activity in the community with extra people here. But fortunately, we haven't had any critical crashes. We've had crashes in number, but they've been pretty minor, which is a good thing, and no critical issues or tragedies in the community with criminal behavior costing, loss of life or otherwise. So that's been a good thing. I know I touched a little bit last month as far as the hound hunting training going on in July and August. We continue to have quite a bit of communication with the different hound hunting groups, as well as the Wisconsin Bear Hunters Association representatives. So hopefully our goal is to try to bring all the hunting groups and communities together there. And we've had a few other calls about hunting concerns there with the hounds, especially in Edgewater. And there's been some investigations and citations issued for dogs at large regarding that. But Outside of that, it's been pretty good here, to our knowledge this summer.
So what does a solution look like regarding this issue?
Well, I think that's kind of a loaded question and it varies from case to case. You know, that going back to the original concern, when they are training or hunting, you know, they're running hounds and these hounds may run 2 to 10 miles. And so they cover a lot of ground. And the hounds, if they're tracking, typically bear or otherwise a coyote, or, you know, during the wolf hunt earlier this year, some of that went on. When they're after their target animal, they get into some private property, which frustrates some of the property owners. Especially, we have some of those areas down in the more desolate parts of the county there where those hunters are baiting or they want to use their land for hunting. So they get frustrated because they feel that someone is on their turf when they have it set up to, you know, hunt on their land with baiting or just traditional hunting otherwise. So that's where a lot of this conflict has come from. And that's all I have at this point regarding this. So I'll turn it over to the chief with communications.
Well, the dispatch center is currently down 1 full-time employee. They are training in 2 new part-time dispatchers. Usually takes about 250 hours of training. Both these part-timers currently have full-time jobs, so the process is going a little slower than it usually does. So over the last year, dispatch has had a large influx of 911 hang-up calls. From the first of the year till now, I think they've received like 648 911 hang-up calls, which is about 6% of the total calls. Corey listed in there and some of the things that the dispatch staff and the patrol staff have to do. It takes up a lot of time because dispatch is trying to call them back. If it doesn't plot, then they don't know where they are, so they're looking for a number. They're sending deputies out to, you know, try to locate these people. A lot of these calls, you know, the dispatch center says you can hear boat motors running, you can hear people laughing, having a good time. Some of the people say, yeah, I put my phone in the cup holder on my lawn chair and it dials 911. So seems like it's more of a prevalent problem with the iPhones. I don't know, I don't have an iPhone, but it seems to be pretty easy to dial 911 on an iPhone. Total number of phone calls are pretty comparable to last June, and the calls for service the same.
Any questions for the chief deputy? You got any questions regarding the communications report?
I do not. Thank you.
To Senator Rapinski.
Echoing in on some of the other comments about more people in the area, you see by the patrol report that our deputies responded to 1,356 calls for service, which is up significantly by about 300 from June, and is also up several hundred from this point last year. Of that, 207 were those hang-up calls that we had to send our officers to. And of course, the vast majority of them were the accidental dials. You can see some of the comparisons now for the accidents, as well as citations issued in my report. We also are currently seeking applicants still for part-time patrol, which is challenging to say the least. We have 2 currently that we're in the process, but it's still very early in the stage right now. So.
Any questions for Lieutenant Rapinski? Chuck, you got any questions on the patrol report?
I do not. Thank you.
And Lieutenant Johnson.
As you can see by my reports, numbers in jail are ever increasing per month. The pre-sentence incarceration is the highest I've seen in a while compared to the other 2. So hopefully as the process gets going with the second courtroom here and is finalized in the next couple of years, that will stay down after that. In addition to that, Dodge Correctional is the intake prison for the state of Wisconsin. I was able to convince them to take all of our males last week, so we shipped 16 off to prison last week, so that helped numbers. We have our annual jail inspection coming up on the 17th. Maintenance is doing a fantastic job coming in and doing touch up and painting and making making the jail look presentable for the inspection. Currently down one full-time male position, and then we're also looking for part-time help as well.
Any questions for Lieutenant Johnson on the jail report? Thank you for your report. Moving on now to General Sherry.
I got promoted as queen last time. I don't have the document report. I just got done on a call of 2 dogs fighting with each other and their owners were trying to rip them apart, but everybody was okay. One was a very large pit bull and the other one was not as big. It was just fortunate that the pit bull decided he wanted to let the other one go, but everybody left happy. A lot of wildlife calls I've noticed that DNR personnel hasn't been available to respond to, or it's something that isn't what they normally do any longer. So there was one in there, just nothing else stands out of the ordinary, but it was a raccoon. I had a call of a raccoon that may or may not have fallen out of a tree or may not be injured. So I was in the area, so I went to the raccoon call, and it was on probably a 10-foot pillar on the back of the people's porch. And there were people and animals around, so I thought if I was available, I could go see if there's anything I could do. So I took my giant net. This little raccoon looked like he was about 8 feet tall when I got there, and he's sitting on the top of this concrete pillar. He did his little raccoon thing, and he was hissing at me, and his eyes were clear, his nose was clear. He appeared moving well, so I took my net, because he was about to tumble 10 feet down off this thing, and got him in the net, and I thought, okay, now what do I do with it? So I asked the homeowner to get a bowl of water, and I walked him to the wood line and put him on the ground. He was still in this giant net that I've got. He's kind of doing the raccoon thing in the net, and we let him go and drank some water and went up the tree. So I think he found his friends back in the woods. So they were very relieved that there was somebody that was available to get the raccoon away from their animals. They had chickens and birds and all kinds of stuff outside.
So who typically responds to a wildlife call?
Of late, nobody. It depends. I had a call that there was an injured fawn, and I was close, so I did go on that. Normally the DNR would go, or if it's a deputy that is available or a city officer and they have to dispatch the animal, they don't have any other choice other than that. I do have some resources with some wildlife sanctuaries through our Humane Society that they will transport if it's an animal that is savable or a bird of prey. One of our local veterinarians is connected with a wildlife sanctuary at Spooner, and she treats the birds of prey for no cost to the county or the taxpayers. And she's got donations set up where she can help these animals out. Otherwise, they can go to Minocqua. There's a facility in Minocqua, and there's one up by the Duluth Airport that will treat mammals. So there are outlets if they've got room available to help us without charging us a penny. At LCO uses a lot of the same people that I do. They've got the same connections, and we share whoever's available with each other. And general stuff.
You say no charge to the taxpayer. We're not going to transport it.
No, we don't transport at all. Unless I just had a situation where a person passed away and there were several dogs involved, there were parrots involved, there were something that I believe escaped the tank that had water to the top of it and fish in it, little minnows that whatever was in there was eating. So I don't know where that went or what it was. It could have been an alligator. I don't know. I couldn't find it. Anyway, if we would have had to take in possession of those things, that would have been a different story. But I worked with someone that was willing to care for these animals in the absence of a next of kin until they were located. And no, unless it's something that I have a seizure, like once I took an alligator from someone, I was responsible. I transported that up to the Duluth Zoo and they took, or the Lake Superior Zoo, and they took possession of it. But normally, no. No, they have volunteers that will either come down and pick these things up, or the Humane Society has volunteers that will do a transport, meet them halfway or whatever. Or unless it's an emergency of some sort, I would go off duty to do it if that's what I had to do, but I haven't had to do that.
Any other questions? Mr. Peters?
I just noticed on the on the licenses this year, down quite a bit. And I just was wondering, do you have is there a reason for that, or is it just because of timing?
Timing is part of it, but the other reason is partially because we were unable to have a vaccination clinic this year.
Oh.
And normally when we do the vaccination clinic, everything that comes into the clinic that resides in the county, they're obligated to purchase their license at that time. And then we also get people that come into the clinic that don't need the shots, but they just get their licenses. We weren't able to do that this year, so it's going to reflect it in the bottom line.
Any other questions? Chuck, you got any questions on the animal control report?
I do not.
Thank you for your report.
You're welcome.
Moving on to precision kiosk.
That should be, and I believe is on the CJCC agenda. That's what we'll be presenting.
Moving on to the August 19th County Board Jail Tour reminder. It's a reminder that you're going to go to jail on August 19th. So unfortunately, I won't be able to attend, but I'll make arrangements to go to jail later on.
Isn't that at 5:30, is it, Chuck?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock,
Yeah.
just a half hour before the meeting?
Sergeant Mike Waller will be conducting a tour. I will be out of the area.
All right, well, that concludes the sheriff's report. Moving on to number 11, we have a report from child support. Is there any questions from the committee on the report that was submitted? Hearing none, moving on to number 12, we have the coroner's report. Is there any question on the coroner's report? Chuck, you got any questions to the reports that were submitted?
I do not have any questions.
All right, with number 13, we got emergency manager report from Ms. Sanchez. Any questions? What's that?
She's at training, so she could not make it.
Any questions on Ms. Sanchez's report? Hearing none, moving on. Number 14, CJCC did not meet in July. We have a meeting scheduled for August 11th. And the only real update coming from there is that Justice Point is maxed out, and we need to probably figure out a way to alleviate that circumstance. Moving on to number 15, the ambulance report. So we do have a report on the accounts receivables, and we have an ambulance report. Nate can't be here because he's covering a shift, and so Louise is still here. Louise, in response to what you provided for public comment, I agree that your issue is, it needs to be addressed. I don't know exactly what that solution is going to look like, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Mr. Hoff refer the matter to corporate counsel for review of our policies to see what is an option in terms of addressing that. And then corporate counsel will come back with an opinion as to the circumstances, and then what is because we're meeting the minimum threshold, but I agree that there needs to be some kind of analysis when it comes to major events, because those events are not surprise events. Those are the events that are planned. And so if there is something that can be done that's not too much of a cost effect on our budget, and we'll come back with that analysis. And so, Louise, I want you to know your concern has been registered with the county, with this committee, and we're going to follow through on it to the end. I don't know what the end is going to look like. I don't know if we're going to get a policy or what, but we will have an answer for what your question is, and then try to develop something that is responsive to that. But I also don't want to promise that we're going to fix this, because I don't know what the fix looks like. So it's going to go to corporate counsel. It'll come back with a review, and then there'll probably be a discussion. And then, if you want to come back, or if you want to be apprised of that, meeting and minutes are posted. So if you have anything else you want to add, this would be a time to address the committee. If the committee has anything else that wishes to discuss in this matter.
I do.
Mr. Buckholz.
What I was told on that certain day in July, when all these other ambulances were out on call, then we had 2 or 3 that were down, and then the other 2 were out on transfers. And this person was told that her response time for an ambulance would be 1.5 hours. That's unacceptable. If that could have been a life-threatening deal, 1.5 hours, that's too much. we need to take a closer look at this. And if we got things like this going on, our transfers shouldn't be going out until the whole county could be covered. If we got a major event going on, all the ambulances stay in the county until such thing. Like I say, that's just response time, an hour and a half to get an ambulance to this person is just way too much. So we're always trying to fix this. So I think, like you said, we need to have court counsel look at this and make changes to this so that does not happen.
Any other comments?
I'm not sure what court counsel has to do.
First step. So there's,
Well, the first step would be to discuss this with the county board. Especially if some resolution does come up, you can contact them. We have the right to change policies.
so this is, well, I wouldn't say the first step. The first step was making a report. So Mr. Hoff received a copy of this. I actually had a conversation with Louise, so did Mr. Buckholz. And so there isn't a specific protocol when making a policy, but it is my belief that we need to understand what the policy requirements are. And so there's a threshold matter that we have, and then we have, there should be a methodical way to approach this so that we don't have, and I want to be respectful of this, that we don't have a crisis dictating what our policies are so that we have a constant review of what's going on. And I think that, you know, Nate's not here to talk, but, you know, we're taking things out of sequence and criticizing them for what their purposes are when the director was given a directive to, you know, make sure we got funding, to make sure that we got coverage, that we make sure that we have those things. And so what we have is we have a major event that required a commitment of one of the, he calls them a truck. And then one truck was down and two were on some kind of transfer. And so the rest were responding to what was a major incident. And so it's easy to say, well, why don't we just have this go in there and there? But, you know, these all happen in real time. And so I wanted corporate counsel to look to make sure that, one, that we don't do anything that impacts our liability, that doesn't impact our coverage, and then also make sure that we have a threat. What is the threshold that requires under statute? Because because of the fact that we have advanced life-saving and we have different levels of care for the paramedics, there's certain thresholds that we need to have in order to maintain coverage. And so it's unfortunate that it takes a serious accident for us to develop a policy, but thankfully, first, one, the child's is in good spirits. I mean, it's the family was able to provide the emergency coverage when there was a lack of a response, appropriate response from the county. She did receive responses from county as we're going forward, but there's a different level of commitment when it comes to care in ambulances. And so, so I want corporate counsel to look at this first and come back with analysis. And then we can bring this up either at the next public safety, we can bring up the full county board, whatever the analysis comes back from corporate counsel, because corporate counsel is an objective, non-biased review of that policy that gives us some kind of framework to go forward, because we know what we want to get to. I just don't want this to be the way that policy is derived by the county. So that's why I'm recommending that, Mr. Schlueter. If you feel that there's another more appropriate method to address that, I'm definitely open to that. Definitely open. I mean, if we're overreacting, I don't know what the next step would be then. I mean,
Better. We're going to cover the whole county. We're going to double the budget. Because we have some very isolated places in this county that are hard to get to. So I'm sorry that this happened, but it's kind of the nature of the beast. This can happen. If there is God forbid, a school bus blow over or something, everybody's gonna be there. The rest of the county's just gonna have to wait for their ambulance calls to come in. I don't believe we can eliminate this.
So, and I agree with that, and that's what I'm trying to not have is crisis dictate what the policy is. And so the request isn't to fix what happened. The request is to progressively or plan ahead so that in the event that something like this happens, it was a unique situation where a truck, no one knows when the truck's going to be in service. No one knows when an accident's going to happen, but we do know when a major event is. And so if there could be enough protocol that in the event that something like happens, then we can see about what the commitment is for the ambulance or, what the proximity for response time. I mean, it's a request, and that's all she's asking for is a consideration of a policy. So I don't think it's untoward to ask for that analysis and come back, because I mean, that's why I was trying to explain to her, we may come up with a solution, or we may have to just say, this is what is the best that we have, with all the constraints. And so that's what I'm really trying my best to try to balance that, because I mean, it is a tragic event, and, thankfully it wasn't more than what it was. And unfortunately it was as much as it was. So Mr. Van Etten, do you have anything you wish to add to this discussion?
No, I think it's going to be something that you're absolutely right, that we can't just, solve this very quickly. We need to look at cost and, some numbers, and that's why we need to get other people involved and see what that gray area is. In a perfect world, yes, we should have an ambulance standing by, just like we have fire trucks standing by, but we also have a bottom line that we have to, and I wouldn't know, and so I can't speak on that, of how much money can be, made. That's a poor word, but how much money can be brought in when a truck is sitting idle, or there should be a clause at the end that says at no time will the county be left unattended for any reason. We will always have one on standby. And if that's the case, then we just need to change some verbiage.
Anybody else have any comments on this issue? Chuck, looks like you lost that fight with the lawnmower.
Well, it's my new weight loss program. I lost 5 pounds by shaving and getting a haircut.
All right, any other questions regarding either the issue that's on the table or the reports that were submitted by Mr. Dunstan? All right, moving on to number 16, future agenda items. Is there anything that the committee wishes to add for next month's agenda? Hearing none, moving on to number 17, matters for correspondence reports from conferences, meetings, and other matters for discussion only. Is there any matters that this committee would like to bring up at this time?
I still have one that I brought to the full board, and I've talked to Tom about, and that money that was in for COVID and the reimbursements of whatnot. I still think solar power is something, and as I'm traveling all my 9 counties, a lot of places are making solar farms, and with that money, if we can't spend it on other things, that is something that's approved, and that is something that would keep being something that can sustain. And so I just want to put that on the floor.
All right, anybody else? Any other comments? All right, thank you, everybody. This meeting is adjourned.